Welcome back to JM Football. My name is Justin Penik. Alongside me is Dalton Feely. This is week 3 for our NFL Power Rankings videos. Where Dalton, we start at 32, listing and ranking NFL teams, and we go up to 1. Dalton, crazy week 2 in the NFL. A lot of close finishes, a lot of finishes that kind of came down to the wire, both at that 1 o'clock slot and the 4 o'clock slot on Sunday. Dalton Feely, how are you?
Doing good. A lot of exciting games. That 1 o'clock slate, man. A couple OT games.
Yeah.
Wild. Great slate of football. Ready to move on to week 3.
All right, so how we're going to start off our Power Rankings videos every single week is we're going to give a winner and we're going to give a loser. So let's start off with the loser.
Let's start off with the loser. My loser. Now, usually when we talk about these winners and losers, we're going to talk about an entire team. I wanted to focus on one side of the ball, and that is the Jaguars offense. The Jaguars offense is my loser. High expectations going into the year. Some people had them as a Super Bowl contender, which they still can be. Just a very underwhelming game from them. Lawrence goes 53% against this Chiefs defense that gets Chris Jones back. All of a sudden, they don't want to block Chris Jones, who gets a sack and a half in his debut of 2023. How about it? And ETN, 12 for 40. Not a great rushing game. No rushing lanes against that Chiefs defense. They allow 4 sacks. They're 3 and 12 on third down. Just a mess. The Jaguars defense keeps them in that game against the Chiefs offense. 3 turnovers, and Ridley and Jones, a combined 2 for 32. Christian Kirk goes off. Ridley and Jones, 2 for 32. A mess for that Jaguars offense. A game they could have won.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because it's really interesting that you say just the Jags offense, because I would say a winner is the Jags defense. Because honestly, you're watching this game and you would think that this is going to be a score fest. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a 38-35 final, but during that 1 o'clock slot, it was the Jaguars-Chiefs game. It was the last game that didn't have a score in it. It was the last game that was 0-0, and I think eventually somebody wound up kicking a field goal for the first score in that game. And the main thing with Trevor Lawrence that he needs to continue to take a step up. When he's throwing from a clean pocket, it's awesome. It's so awesome. And you saw a lot of the throws against the Indianapolis Colts kind of just putting it perfectly, like Evan Engram on the sideline. The touchdown that he had just placed it right in the breadbasket of a receiver. Just insane throws from a clean pocket. But when you have pressure in your face, how can you extend plays? How can you deliver a football? And that's really what distinguishes, in my opinion, the best quarterbacks in the league and some of maybe the more average ones or the bad quarterbacks. How can you deal with pressure? And that's going to have to be something, especially when we talk about playoff football where everything is just elevated, and that includes pass rushes. That's going to be something that he needs to get better at. So Jags offense, I will say, I don't know if I would call them the biggest loser, but for expectations, they certainly disappointed this
Huge
game.
miss in week 2. But we got some bright sides. We got to go to our winner. Who do you have as our winner? A little surprise here.
The Washington Commanders. They are 2-0 for the first time since 2011. They scored 35 points, the most since 2020, and they had an 18-point road comeback, the largest since 1990. So
how about it?
How about those Commanders?
Listen, new ownership, man. They go 2-0 all of a sudden. Good for Washington, man. They need that.
And, the crazy thing is that, the best, you think Ron Rivera's on his way out, which, hey, he still could be. He had the first week against the Cardinals, the second week against the Broncos, 2 probably very not good teams. But still, it's a huge W for the Commanders just starting 2-0. You have 2 other NFC East teams that are also starting 2-0. But for new ownership, and you don't know what exactly is going to happen, is Ron Rivera on his way out? The best way that you can force ownership into a decision is by winning. And certainly they're off to a great start. Eric Bieniemy had a really, really good game plan against the Broncos, especially as they started to kind of come back in the game. They were down 21-3, but as soon as Russell Wilson fumbles that ball, like in that second quarter, they just really started a really cool comeback. The running game was really working for them well. Brian Robinson, Sam Howell had a very low average depth of target, and I think an issue for Howell, and I think the Commanders are starting to realize this, is taking sacks and not handling pressure that well. We just talked about that with Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
So getting rid of the ball quickly and keeping that average depth of target short and making things simple for Sam Howell, it was a W for the Commanders, W for Eric Bieniemy. Very good game plan against the Broncos. And you can argue the Broncos blowing that 18-point lead not getting that 2-point conversion after the Hail Mary, you can argue that they're the biggest losers. Sean Payton has never blown a lead like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was debating him as the biggest loser, but you said, I mean, give credit to the Commanders. They got to beat their schedule. Yeah. That's a tough game. Even if the Broncos don't have the highest expectations as they have in the past, you're going to Mile High, and it's named Mile High for a reason, folks. That altitude plays a factor when you're playing in Denver, and Washington with that amazing comeback, it's a much-needed win to start their season.
All right, so we break up our power rankings into tiers. We're going to start off with the bottom. We'll work our way up to the top. Our first tier is Caleb Williamsville. At 32, we have the Chicago Bears. 31, we have the Houston Texans. 30, we have the Carolina Panthers. And 29, we have the Arizona Cardinals in Caleb Williamsville. I'm sure there are some people that may be shocked to see the Bears at 32, but maybe not. They have legitimately looked like the worst team in football.
They're just very sluggish, man. I mean, it's a very weird time to be a Chicago Bears fan. You had these high expectations with Justin Fields, and he's looked very off. Like he's been not wanting to run the ball. They've only called 2 design runs, which is Justin Fields' wheelhouse.
And I have stats on that.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, him.
2022, he had 10.7 rushing attempts per game. 2023, it's down to 6.5. I mean, that's almost down to close to his rookie year where he had 6 rushing attempts per game, 31 yards per game, rushing yards per game, that is, in 2023. Last year, it was 76.2. So I sometimes think less is more for quarterbacks in the NFL. And for, like, you even see, like, what Greg Roman did for years for Lamar Jackson is just make things simple. It eventually got Greg Roman. He got the boot because of it. But I think Justin Fields needs that right now, where it's way too complicated. There's way too much happening in that Chicago offense. And sometimes you see the worst offenses and the most highly criticized offensive coordinators, where you see a lot of Bears, like a lot of those fans will talk about how the offense is too complicated. And sometimes that's not a great thing. And for the Bears, it's not a good thing. That roster's not talented. The defense is not there. The offensive line is not there. And Justin Fields isn't doing the things that he was doing last year to be successful and effective, which is get explosive plays when he's running the ball. Let's get back to that. All right, so let's. I just want to briefly talk about the Arizona Cardinals, and they're at 29. I believe last week we had them at 32.
Yep.
So even though they're 0-2, we have them up to 29 because they're 2-0 against the spread.
Yeah, how about it? I mean, and you have a big lead versus your New York Giants. I know you're probably panicking watching that game, going, "What the hell is my team doing versus the Arizona Cardinals?" Josh Dobbs, greatest quarterback in Tennessee history. No, I'm just kidding. That was toxic. No, but listen, that was for the first half, if you're watching that game, if you're telling me one of those teams went to the playoffs in 2022 and the other was one of the worst teams in football, you're thinking the Arizona Cardinals was that team that went to the playoffs last season. Josh Dobbs was very efficient early on. James Conner rushes for over 100 yards in that game. But, give credit where credit's due to the Giants coming back down 28-7 in that third quarter. You did not want to start 0-2, especially in that NFC East that we're talking about. Huge comeback for the Giants, but Cardinals staying in there that whole game.
Good teams win, great teams cover, they say. And
Absolutely.
The Cardinals are 2-0, and they're undefeated in the category that matters. All right, let's go to the next tier. Thank you, next. We have the Indianapolis Colts at 28, the Broncos at 27, Raiders at 26, Titans at 25, and the Vikings at 24. Big droppers this week.
Yeah, I mean, for the Vikings, real quick, it's just prove it to us. Like, we were getting ripped about having the Vikings so low, but we just weren't sold on their roster. Like, we knew that they're going to have a harder schedule going into the year. Their defense is just absolutely atrocious. In the last 2 weeks, we've shown it. Baker and the Bucs, week 1, they put up 20 and a big win. Week 2, Philly puts up 34 on them on Thursday night. So just Minnesota, that offense has been clicking. We got to minimize their turnovers, which has been their Achilles heel so far. It's been the big,
and honestly, they turned over the ball a lot last year. Except now they've lost 2 games of one-score games.
Where they're undefeated last season.
Where they won all of them, which that's something that you have to keep an eye out for in the NFL, and that's something that could flip year after year is those one-score games and your record in those one-score games. But they lead the NFL in first-quarter turnovers over the last 2 years. Which,
getting behind 8 ball.
Not good, which they did that last year, and it worked for them because then you just throw the ball, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, distribute that ball. But we said it last week, where did they get better on their roster? You can say Jordan Addison in the first round, but he's replacing Adam Thielen,
who is serviceable.
Jordan Addison is going to be very good, but on that defense where they really needed help, They made no upgrades, and they got worse by letting Dalvin Tomlinson walk and Zadarius Smith, which...
Zadarius Smith is a very underrated pass rusher. Yeah, that's a huge loss. I will say, Danielle Hunter, glad that he's back playing football in terms of at a high level. He's been dominant the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, Broncos at 27-2. Man, Russell Wilson fumbles that ball. So weird how he fumbles the ball and he touches it. He has the ball near his person, and he just doesn't make an effort to get it. That launched the Commanders' comeback, like we were just talking about a couple minutes ago. Now the thing with Russ is when they were really winning and when they were scoring all those touchdowns, Russell Wilson's average depth of target was over 10 yards this week. I believe it was the highest in the NFL from week 2. The explosive plays were coming left and right, and they were really cooking.
Marvin Mims, man.
And it just really went downhill from there. So Broncos at 27. I have a feeling they're going to be staying around this tier, for the foreseeable future. And similar with the Vikings, really, it's all these teams prove it. Go out there and prove it to us.
Yep. Titans had a nice win week 2. Colts had a nice win week 2. Raiders week 1. But again, lower expectations for these teams. Just prove it to us. Keep winning games.
Mid-mamma. 23, we have the Patriots. 22, we have the Bucks. 21, we have the Commanders. 20, we have the Steelers. 19 and 18 are the New York teams, the Jets and the Giants, respectively.
Yeah, I want to touch on this Bucks team. This is their third time in a row starting the season 2-0. They're the only team in the NFL to start the season 2-0 the last 3 seasons. So give credit to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster. Just keep going, getting those W's early on in September. The Bucs offense versus the Bears, one of the reasons why we have them so low, the Bucs generated 437 yards of offense. We were going in wondering, all right, Tom Brady's not playing quarterback anymore. It's Baker Mayfield, the veteran at this point, the journeyman. And that offense puts up 437 yards. Bucs offense, 0 turnovers. They could have had one in the third quarter. Baker fumbles, they recover it. But they've out the turnover battle. They're winning 5-0, and that's a way you're going to win games early in the year. You're not turning the ball over. And on third down, Baker Mayfield. I saw a stat from Ari on Twitter.
Yeah.
Such great follow. He's 20 for 23 on third down. 201 yards, 3 touchdowns, 132-1 rating. Unbelievable on third down.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I'm sure part of that is, number one, either avoiding third down or just putting yourself in a good situation on third down, right. Manageable third downs. And that's a sign of a really good offense, is when you can, if you're going to face third down, at least put yourself in a situation where you can pick up a third down. So I want to talk about the Patriots too.
Let's do it.
2 really tough opponents to start the year. And that, I guess, is maybe the asterisk with the New England Patriots, because you have week 1. Remind me who they played.
Week 1, they played the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, so week 1, you have the Eagles, defending NFC champs. And then week 2, you're playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the most explosive offense in the NFL. So 2 really tough opponents. And also, we'll see what the Miami Dolphins defense looks like. But I think their defense is... it's better than what it has been in previous years. There's talent there.
I will say they looked better week 2, and that's without Jalen Phillips. Bradley Chubb came to life week 2 in that game, but no Jalen Phillips, and that defense looked serviceable. So that's a good sign. And
we got yelled at for having the Patriots so low, especially after competing with the Eagles so much.
Yep.
But show me any optimism or any sign of it's going to get better on offense, because they're slow. They're not explosive, and those are the 2 things in the NFL that you really need on offense. You need speed. You need to be explosive. Show me where that's going to come from, this Patriots offense. I'm not changing what I think about this Patriots team just because their defense is really good.
They're not fun. Max looked good. I don't want to say he's looked better than good. He's been a pretty solid quarterback, 31 of 42. But like you said, they're just a boring offense. It doesn't mean they're a bad offense. It's just they're going to, chug their way down the field, but it's just not going to be in explosive chunks. It's going to be inch by inch, yard by yard. One thing I wanted to point out with this Pats team, the big thing for them, their problem, they're getting off to slow starts. They're down 16-0 in week 1 versus Philly, and you're off the gate.
And you're not explosive enough to come back and throw the ball.
And 17-3 in week 2. So if you're not explosive to make those big plays to come back, and you're down 14 plus points early on, you're not going to win those games most times.
Yeah, and they're a team too that's benefited off of insane. And this is part of football. Special teams plays and defensive touchdowns, forcing turnovers on defense. Mm-hmm. When you're relying on that, that's not a great spot to be in. But they are there. The Pats special teams, Pats defense is still very good. Any other thoughts on the mid-mem tier? We talked about the Commanders.
Yep. Steelers D looks really good. Waiting for them to click. Matt Canada. Dude, we got to get it going. I mean, the run game hasn't looked great. Wondering if we still mix up Warren and Harris. Warren in the screen game looked great. Pickens had that nice play on Monday night for 71 yards. But, man, we got a lot of skill players. Pickett's in his second year. We got to get the ball rolling. Like, we gotta start getting that offense some yardage and some points on the board.
Yeah, one of the things that we thought heading into this year with the Steelers and Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett, I know Deontay Johnson is hurt, but we thought that they were going to start to throw the ball a little bit more. And it's been 1st and 10 and 2nd and long runs that are just putting the Steelers behind schedule. And then you have a pass rush like the Cleveland Browns that are able to get after Kenny Pickett. So that's the disappointing part about the Steelers so far this year is just, we thought that we would see that step up in the passing game, and we just haven't fully seen it yet. They did win. It's like we're talking about they lost. They won the game against the Browns, but certainly there's a lot to be desired there.
Absolutely.
Playoffs, why not? 17, we have the Browns. 16, we have the Packers. 15, we have the Rams. Big jump for the Rams. 14, Falcons. 13, Chargers. 12, we have the Saints.
I just want to say with the Rams, they lost versus the Niners, but one of the reasons why they're one of our biggest jumpers on this list, they looked pretty darn good. I mean, they beat Seattle week 1 handedly, and we're like, okay, that's a great start, a little eye-popping there. And then they're playing against the NFC champion team that almost made the Super Bowl last year, and the San Francisco 49ers. They're in there at 17-17 late in the game.
Yeah.
If it's not for 2 Stafford picks, one of which not his fault, this game could have been coming down to the wire, could have been a late field goal, but Niners pull it off. Rams, very impressive through week 2.
Yeah, this could just be like an ignorant football fan talking, but I still don't know what talent do they have on that team.
Puka Nakua's been really good. Kyron Williams steps up for Cam Akers.
Who thought he was a talent? I mean, people liked him from the Senior Bowl and thought he was a grinder and stuff like that. But, what talent? I thought the O-line was going to be a disaster.
And the offensive line was their huge concern, and they're been serviceable.
They're holding up.
If we haven't seen major issues with them, you're doing a solid job so far. You know?
So the Rams, and Sean McVay's the head coach.
Right.
At the end of the day, which, coaching means everything in the NFL, and the Rams are continuing to move up despite being 1-1. The Falcons, there's 3 teams that are so now we finished the NFC South teams. The Saints and the Falcons are in this playoffs why not tier. NFC South has a very easy schedule this year. That kind of comes with the caveat, but why are you going to penalize teams for having an easy schedule? And the Falcons are a team that's rising up. You want to talk about the Chargers?
This is for my baseball people out here.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm
out.
Yeah, you're out. For my baseball people, for those who don't know, talking baseball researcher here, the Chargers and the Padres are just the same team. Sure. I don't know how else to say it. They're the same team. They're both teams that play in California and either used to play in San Diego or still play in San Diego. Both these teams had high expectations. We thought the Padres would overtake the Dodgers in the NL West. We thought the Chargers would overtake the Chiefs in the AFC West. Both teams have superstars on their team. Padres, Soto, Machado, Tatis, Snell, Hader. Chargers, Herbert, Eckler, Mack, Bosa, Derwin James. Both teams are underachieving these expectations. Padres are 73 and 78, and they're 4th in the NL West. Chargers are 0-2. They're tied for last in the AFC West. And they lost in the AFC wildcard, so underachieving those expectations. And in both these teams, for some reason, I don't know what's in the water down there, but they can't win close games. The Padres are 6-22 in one-run games, 0-11 in extra inning games. The Chargers are 0-2 in games decided by a field goal or less this season, and they're 0-1 in overtime games this season. And lastly, the Chargers, since their bye week in week 22, I don't know if you know this or saw on my Twitter yesterday, all the Chargers' losses since their bye week in 2022 have been by 1 possession or less. So they all their losses, they're there. They just haven't finished those games.
Brutal.
Chargers and Padres, same team, convince me otherwise.
Chargers have the Vikings coming up too.
That's going to be a funny game to watch.
Which, if they lose, and I'm sure that you can already argue that the Chargers are too high on this. Well, it's like, Justin and Dalton, the Falcons are 2-0. The Rams are 1-1.
Yep.
You can argue that they're already too high, but it's like, man,
they're good.
Herbert, you got a good offense.
Their offense EPA is just through the roof still. That's not their problem. That's not.
You have a defensive coach. You have a defensive coach who seems to just never have very good defenses, despite a lot of resources being put on that defense.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Staley is now reminding me of Mike Zimmer's final years in Minnesota. where it's a good offense, but defensive coach.
Right.
At least Mike Zimmer actually did have good defenses at one point. So I still do like Mike Zimmer as a coach.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, so Chargers do play the Vikings, and that will be a big
Who's gonna stop who in that game? That's my question. That might be like a shootout.
Two teams that sometimes feel like it feels like they don't want to win, and they do things to shoot themselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. So who's actually going to win?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see that game. That's going to be a one to watch for week 3.
Playoffs, you better be there. The next tier, we have the Lions at 11, the Seahawks at 10. Lions drop 1 spot. Seahawks jump a couple spots because the Seahawks beat the Lions. Jaguars at 9, Bengals at 8, Ravens at 7.
You and I are Lions guys. I was a little upset about that game, 37-31. Detroit, you're playing in Ford Field. It's a sellout crowd. You're excited for the season. You beat the Chiefs week 1. You're playing the Seahawks, who got rampled at home versus the Rams. And you kind of lay a goose egg defensively. Geno throws for 328 yards. Kenneth Walker scores 2 touchdowns. Game goes to OT. Lockett gets his 2 touchdowns, his second of the game, resulting in the game winner. Just a little upset by that Lions performance in week 2. I really thought that could have been a game where it's like, hey, okay, we're here. We're real. And they still could be. Don't get me wrong. Goff still played really good. Montgomery, who got banged up in that game, was still efficient. St. Brown also banged up, which could have been a result of why they didn't win this game. 6 for 102 still. But Lions, let's go. Come on, bounce back from that week 2 loss for Seattle.
Yeah, you don't want to put up similar performances as you did last year, where just defense can't keep up, keep up, because we know the offense is there. And great bounce back by the Seahawks too, especially after the Rams, thinking that, are the Rams even good? And now I feel better about the Seahawks lost week 1 because seeing how the Rams competed with the 49ers, and then obviously the Seahawks actually going out and winning and making themselves 1-1. We talked a lot about the Jaguars. We'll touch on the Bengals and Ravens. They're right next to each other. They just played each other. What are your thoughts?
The Ravens and Bengals always play good games. I'm just shocked for how banged up Baltimore came into that game, going to Cincinnati and beating them. That's a very impressive win.
Mike McDonald seems to have the number of what the Bengals are doing on offense.
Absolutely. I mean, that defense did a great job, especially early in that game. The Bengals were just finding no success, whether it's in the ground or the passing game. Nothing. And obviously, Cincinnati comes back to make that game close. But that's a huge win for Baltimore, a divisional game on the road. Their offense looks sluggish week 1 versus the Texans. To come into Cincinnati, put up 27, and win that game, that could be, when we're in December, that could be huge. That could be huge.
Yeah, and man, Joe Burrow's average after target 5.4. EPA per play is almost 0.
I'm wondering
it's in the let's see here. It's in the 48th percentile, and he may not play.
I'm wondering how healthy he was going into the game, and now even more so with that calf and the leg and the hamstring and all that jazz. They just don't look like that same explosive offense from 2022 yet. Mixon, 4.5 yards per carry versus Baltimore. It's just not been that same offense. Brian Callahan, a guy who's been getting head coaching interviews this last season, got to step that offense up. T. Higgins, at least, nice bounce back game after a goose egg in week 1, 8 for 89 and 2 touchdowns. Good performance by him. Good bounce back.
Yeah, Jamar Chase not really fully involved until that second half. So I'm still not overall worried about the Bengals, but it's funny. Jamar Chase said over the summer, he said, I do not want Joe Burrow rushed back. Right. And then he even said after the game this past week, the reporter asked him, do you think Burrow was rushed back? And he was like, yeah, I kind of think he was. And maybe Jamar Chase is right. And at the end of the day, it is kind of up to the player. I'm not blaming the Bengals. I think it's Joe Burrow's yeah, I'm good.
Burrow wants to be out there.
Even though maybe he's not.
Most players want to be out there in those situations. The big problem with the Bengals now, they're 0-2, but they're also 0-2 in divisional games. So if we're thinking that AFC North is going to be a competitive division, which I think it still could be, an 0-2 divisional start is not good for that tiebreaker.
No. But I feel like if the Bengals can make the playoffs at 9-8, I'll still consider them a top 10 team in the NFL.
And they started 0-2 last season. Yeah. And then they went on this amazing run to finish.
They could beat anybody anywhere, in my opinion.
Right. So I'm not.
All right.
The only big difference is that Burrow's banged up. Last year he had the appendectomy versus this year, it's an injury that could linger on.
Yeah. All right, Lombardi Land.
Everyone's favorite spot to be, unless you're not there.
First tier, we have the Bills at 6, the Dolphins at 5, 49ers at 4, Eagles at 3, Chiefs at 2, Cowboys at 1. Dalton, every single team in Lombardi land won this past week.
Man, I mean, they're there for a reason. Lombardi land is for the winners. They just did that. With the Niners, that's the team I really want to touch on because they played a very close game versus the Rams. But for some reason, the NFC West between the Niners, the Rams, and the Seahawks, it's kind of like a carousel of which coach beats which coach. Like Sean McVay has Pete Carroll's number, and Kyle Shanahan has Sean McVay's number. The only time the Niners have lost since December of 2018 versus the Rams was in the NFC Championship game when the Rams won and made it to the Super Bowl to win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
They've won 9 straight versus the Rams, so they have their number. Brock Purdy, this is the first time he doesn't throw for a touchdown in his career as a starter. So it was the first time, at least down the field, where I was like, ooh, that's not a good throw. He missed Ayuk down the field. He missed Debo, a couple potential touchdowns they left on the board. But still, divisional game. I always say those are the hardest games to predict because at some point you see these guys a lot. You can get a little upset there. Niners do a good job. CMC, 100% of the snaps. How about it? Repping the CMC jersey too today, ironically.
100%.
As a running back, you never see that. Elijah Mitchell doesn't play.
He had like a 60-yard run, and he stayed in the game.
He played, yeah. Kyle Shanahan said he regretted not putting Elijah in. Elijah Mitchell's a really good running back too. When he's on the field, like I was really hoping. Quick sidebar. I was really hoping that with the JT news that we would go get him and make a trade for Elijah because he's awesome. But regardless, CMC is that special talent for a reason. Plays 100% of the snaps. Is that guy on the offense that's like, all right, let's go.
Right.
First time an NFL running back has rushed for over 100 yards week 1 and week 2 since Saquon Barkley, 2019.
Oh.
CMC, good company. Keep it going, man.
2019? Giants went 0-2 in 2019.
Love that.
No, I don't. So we did put the Dolphins ahead of the Bills. But I'm going to say this. Like, these top 6 teams, like, there's not maybe a huge gap. Maybe I would say at least with the top 5. But the Bills did have a really nice, convincing win against the Raiders, which they needed. They needed for my brain, because especially after seeing that first drive, the Raiders just marched down the field, and I'm like, are we going to see something here?
And Buffalo, nonetheless, yeah.
We didn't. We didn't. It was the Bills' defense that really took care of business, and I was happy to see that. Dolphins continue to be explosive against a good Patriots defense.
2-5-0 versus New England and Bill Belichick, which is crazy to say.
That's even like with Brian Flores teams too.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Talked about the 49ers. Eagles are continuing to do what they have to do. The Chiefs still at 2. Now I will say Patrick Mahomes playing really good quarterback, but the rest of the team not being up to par, especially with the offensive line. Jawan Taylor being benched. He got an $80 million contract this offseason, and the wide receivers just not doing what they need to do. So Mahomes is still playing good quarterback. He's just waiting for the rest of the offense to really catch up.
We said last week that we would have them won until we had at least mild concerns about why they shouldn't be. Mahomes is playing great. That's not our concerns. Our concerns is the offense around him. So they haven't been convincing enough to stay in that one slot. The Dallas Cowboys outscoring their opponent 70-10 through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's pretty darn convincing to be the number 1 overall slot.
Yeah, so really, we did say, we're going to keep the Chiefs at 1 until, like, something else happens. And I think that something else is the Cowboys they're a better team.
They're just overall right now.
If you put the Cowboys and the Chiefs in a game, the Chiefs could win that 6-7 times, maybe even 8 times out of 10, right? Hypothetically, if you put them in a matchup. But power rankings list is the team better than the other team, and the Cowboys are just flat out the best team in the NFL right now, and it's led by that defense. And even like my one of my best friends is a Cowboy fan, so I called him on Sunday. I said, how do you think the game went? Final score, what, like 30-10?
30-10, yep.
And he's like, I still wasn't really happy with some of the offensive play calls, though we could have scored more. It's like, that's what we're feeling?
If we're missing Kellen Moore, and that's the biggest complaint, like,
Come on.
We're okay.
Yeah, you're in a good spot. Against the Jets defense, that's really good. You put up a 30 burger.
Quick sidebar on that, their defense, like I had some expectations for at least the defense in that game. They got 0 pass rush on Dak. Dak looked very comfortable. Running game looked good. Put up 30 points against that Jets defense.
And somewhat of a quote-unquote concern about the Cowboys was the offensive line and maybe the depth. And hey, Tyron Smith, let's get through a season. And that's been an issue for him.
Terrence Steele, Tyler Smith, let's go.
But so far, not a major issue for them. So,
no.
Dalton, that's our Is this our week 2? I said week 3 at the start.
You did say week 3, but we're going into week 3.
We're going into week 3. So next week will be week 4. We'll figure out what the name. It's Power Rankings video. Thanks for watching.
Bye, guys.